Hey boy, would you meet me on the roof tonight? I got a surprise for you. Meet me on the rooftop in the night. I'm gonna give it to you. Come and get my love delight. Oh, something's got me so delighted, baby. I see your face in everything I do. You got me shook up, shook down, shook out on your loving, and boy, there is just no way I'll ever get over you.
Hey yo, if you wanna be a superstar, dial 31414 right now. I'm a superstar with Justin Bieber, Michael Jackson, Apotreki, Izinja, Abomaporisa. I'm a superstar with Justin Bieber, Michael Jackson, Apotreki, Izinja, Bemisolo Nabo Wiz Khalifa. Uzovajayivela ngathi Chris Brown, ubhizi Cardi B, ushaye get down, ubhizi ukamompela makabuya London, hlangane senti enjanjani. Uzovajayivela ngathi Chris Brown, ubhizi Cardi B, ushaye get down, ubhizi ukamompela makabuya London, hlangane senti enjanjani. I'm a superstar with Justin Bieber, Michael Jackson, Apotreki, Izinja, Abomaporisa. I'm a superstar with Justin Bieber, Michael Jackson, Apotreki, Izinja, Bemisolo Nabo Wiz Khalifa. Uzovajayivela ngathi Chris Brown, ubhizi Cardi B, ushaye get down, ubhizi ukamompela makabuya London, hlangane senti enjanjani. Uzovajayivela ngathi Chris Brown, ubhizi Cardi B, ushaye get down, ubhizi ukamompela makabuya London, hlangane senti enjanjani.
Tena mbona watakoma mwaka huu wataisoma, washagushi ganja choma na pakusha chapa ngoma. sanka tumela tumela stampa kana kera najina na hela napenda na madem na masala hiyo sanka tumela tumela stampa kana kera najina na hela napenda na madem na masala.
I'm a superstar with Justin Bieber, Michael Jackson, Apo Drake, Izinja, Abo Maporisa. I'm a superstar with Justin Bieber, Michael Jackson, Apo Drake, Izinja. Bemi solo na bo Wiz Khalifa. Uzoba chayvela ngathi Chris Brown, ubhizi Cardi B, ushayike it down. Ubhizi kamompela magabuya London, hlangane senti, njanja. Uzoba chayvela ngathi Chris Brown, ubhizi Cardi B, ushayike it down. Ubhizi kamompela magabuya London, hlangane senti, njanja. I'm a superstar with Justin Bieber, Michael Jackson, Apo Drake, Izinja, Abo Maporisa. I'm a superstar with Justin Bieber, Michael Jackson, Apo Drake, Izinja. Bemi solo na bo Wiz Khalifa. Uzoba chayvela ngathi Chris Brown, ubhizi Cardi B, ushayike it down. Ubhizi kamompela magabuya London, hlangane senti, njanja. Uzoba chayvela ngathi Chris Brown, ubhizi Cardi B, ushayike it down. Ubhizi kamompela magabuya London, hlangane senti, njanja. Like Fokker, pull up in a beam, too much, too clean, young taller. I don't foster, serious in order. A big time player, crib too big in ganja. I went flexer, Tina said Jimmer, too hot like a heater. My neck done froze like winter. Don't bet it on liquor, Shay's told me picture. MJ on the shit, thriller. Funny vibes every night. Enter, nang talagat. Costa, I can style like Fokker. Pull up in a beam, too much, too clean and taller. I don't foster, serious in order. A big time player, a crib too big in Kanye. I went flexer, Tina said Jim, too hot like a heater. My neck done froze like winter. Don't bet it on liquor. Shay's told me picture. MJ on the shit, thriller. Funny vibes every night.
I forget. Recupera diverse. To the full set, the Otama Jet, the Lebanon, but dance. Oh yes, my baby's oh yes. Oh yes, my baby's oh yes. If all the future couple don't perion, I to make a dive. I forget. Recupera diverse. To the full set, the Otama Jet, the Lebanon, but dance. Oh yes, my baby's oh yes. Oh yes, my baby's oh yes. If all the future couple don't perion, I to make a dive.
Fokker, yeah. Pull up in a beam, too much, too clean, I'm taller. Don't foster, serious and daughter. A big time player, trip too big and ganja. I went flexer, yeah. Tina said gym, yeah. Too hot like a heater. My neck done froze like winter. Don't bet it on liquor, yeah. Shay's on me, picture. MJ on the sheet, thriller. Funny vibes every night. Enter, non-calagat, Costa, yeah. I can style like Fokker, Pull up in a beam, too much, too clean, I'm taller. Don't foster, serious and daughter, yeah. A big time player, a crib too big and ganja. I went flexer, yeah. Tina said gym, yeah. Too hot like a heater. My neck done froze like winter. Don't bet it on liquor, yeah. Shay's on me, picture. MJ on the sheet, thriller. Funny vibes every night. Enter.
I show you my bank account. Two-Face, I get it plenty to go around. So girl, make you dance when you hear this sound. Now we the puppy all over town. So tell me if you did down, did down. Do you know? Say oh, me to ball like oh. Girl I know. Some things that you do not know. Whether na traffic I be go slow. Baby, I promise I go still show. Spending money, Pablo. I suppose she locates, but I go buy Belgium. My money na alele, I apply pressure. But it's like she my palava, put on for high tension. You must apply your tea, big boy, you must apply plenty. Mismanage my funds on you, all I really wanna do is mismanage my funds. Mismanage my funds on you, all I wanna do is mismanage my funds.
Alright, okay. Them bro got off for the voltage. Tilapia, côté. Bring a goofy with the cocaine. Gobe, you see the bed, do not replay. Find a bacha for my bro say. Conquer the streets we see play.
I need your billing up body, all got the pump. If I handle this your body, all got so close, all got so close. If you put me for palava, nje bolo ifala. What can a man, what be fair, ego lempe. Come play, just see my baby.
I suppose she locates, but I go buy Belgium. My money na alele, I apply pressure. But it's like she my palava, put on for high tension. But you must apply your tea, big boy, you must apply plenty. Mismanage my funds on you, all I really wanna do is
Mismanage my funds.
mismanage my funds on you, all I wanna do is mismanage my funds on you, all I really wanna do is
Mismanage my funds. Mismanage my funds for you.
Sweet melody.
What is it that they told you? Telling me how they be fooling you like on the telling me how they be fooling you like on the my darling, my darling. Give me yo, my darling. Give me yo, my darling. Give me yo, my darling. Isabella, Abora Isabella, Jowo, I didn't tell ya. The Kayamata where you do me did ya, the walk. Kayamata tilakya, creepy pity juju where you do me tilakya. Oh, don't me no know why you be feeling awkward. My compo, she carry la carry.
Matching my steez, you know I'm a G. Shawty, I'm always keep it real. I know they for too much whining, they for too much whining. I see they be, I see shy you they enter. Oh yeah, make you call a beat. Oh yeah, show yourself, do a basabi. The love is in the air, baby breathing. I dey available, baby anytime you need me, I dey available. Compatible, two of us they compatible. Girl I be bad boy for girls say I dey mellow. Ah baby I dey forward, baby take it slow, baby go down low. Nobody has to know. Yeah, I know I play around, but me no bitch to let you go. Baby, some money. You know say you matching my steez. You know I'm a G. Shawty, I'm always keep it real. I know they for too much whining, they for too much whining. I see they be, I see shy you they enter. Oh yeah, make you call a beat. Oh yeah, show yourself, do a basabi. The love is in the air.
I got pictures on my phone of you. iPhone storage done they full. No one sees this side of you. I feel blessed, I trust in you. Midnight calls and rendezvous. I'm indecisive, but you I choose. So don't let me down, don't let you down. I feel so down, away from you. Let's make babies. We're still young, but I did red. Smoke some weed at the beach. I feel ease when I'm with you. Crazy air spray, your life came through. You should see you from a point of view. They don't know, they have no clue. They don't know, they have no clue. I don't fall in love. I don't fall in love. So not this one, no not they enjoy. She not this one, no not they enjoy. I don't fall in love. I don't fall in love. So not this one, no not they enjoy. She not this one, no not they enjoy.
Baby, some money. You know say you matching my steez. You know I'm a G. Shawty, I'm always keep it real. I know they for too much whining, they for too much whining. I see they be, I see shy you they enter. Oh yeah, make you call a beat. Oh yeah, show yourself, do a basabi. The love is in the air.
And if you hear this and then go on, then go back. to the max. Did you please turn up the bass to the max? Please just rewind, let me shake it to the max. 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 Please just rewind, let me shake it to the max.
Bad man, she love. Bad man, she love. Yeah. Bad man, she love. Yeah. Bad man, she love. Bad man, she love. Yeah. Bad man, she love. Bad man, she love. Yeah. Your pussy fat inna your shot.
Oh, you dealing with the boss?
Make you come first, coulda never take a last. Yeah. Like a ball, pump up the pussy fast. Skin out the pussy for me fuck it. Girl, you make it cocky brad. Original girl, some of them a dinner calf.
And if you hear this sound, then go and bend your back. Go and bend your knees, baby, shake it to the max. But did you please turn up the bass to the max? Please just rewind, let me shake it to the max. 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 Please just rewind, let me shake it to the max.
Caribbean girl, me know for tick, me know for top. Yeah, man, I watch my body like say them, I watch a match. Yeah, anything him say them, girl, I do it like it's tax. Ma make my own money like the girls in movie trap. Classy, real bad girl, ma get nasty. I do whatever I want, just become a bossy. Yes, I'm the one in charge. Never get my pums and him still fall in love. Yes, and not anybody can touch this. Baby, I am not a hoe. Rice and peas, body hotter than jollof. I feel beg a taste anyway, you see my pass.
And if you hear this sound, then go and bend your back. Go and bend your knees, baby, shake it to the max. But did you please turn up the bass to the max? Please just rewind, let me shake it to the max. 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 Please just rewind, let me shake it to the max.
Don't have to fear, number one in command. I came just to kill me and too militant. They won't figure eight, but I don't need a man. Still they love how me whine and me true religion. You dealing with the body, of course. Oh, you dealing with the boss. If we break up, yeah, you know that it's a loss. Upgraded every dude I ever touched. Study want me back, you can't touch this. Baby, I already leveled up. You looking for love and I'm looking for your love. Baby, you can handle all the sauce.
And if you hear this sound, then go and bend your back. Go and bend your knees, baby, shake it to the max. But did you please turn up the bass to the max? Please just rewind, let me shake it to the max. 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 Please just rewind, let me shake it to the max.
Gymnastic, baby. Put the motion, baby. Oh no, what a bad man, baby. Oh no, what a bad man, baby. Oh no, what a bad man, baby. Fully plastic. Ole, ole, oh, Linda. Money you feel me, if I put the more ginger. I be you one time daily. Tell me, you go fit to daily. Money, ever feel good, baby. 25 come from my belly. On my way, don't look far away when I get next to your body. Relax on my shorty, yeah, yeah. On my way, so don't look far away. Usually easy, my darling. Hold on to my touch, oh no, no, sky, my medulla, medulla. Is on my medulla. This your time tonight. Chiki chiki and fan tonight. Your bum bum so secular. Oh oh cuckoo say cool. Man is scary but I love you, love you. One thing I show you, better loving I show you, show you. On my way to you, on my way baby oh. And better loving I show you. Do you remember when I said the way you love me, the way you treat me, the way you do me, the make I wanna do this. Call on me when you need me. I gon' come through with speed. On my way, don't look far away when I get next to your body. Relax on my shorty, yeah, yeah. On my way, so don't look far away. Usually easy, my darling. Hold on to my touch, oh no, no, don't you bring it on my way?
Hold me around my waist. You can take it slow, baby. Control the pace. Way I rotate, baby, that's a little taste. Way I rotate, I'ma put you in your place.
Bad girl, no delay.
Baby, let's shake. I don't wanna stop, baby. I don't need a break. For the rotate, you know I don't wanna wait. We can go late, make my body celebrate. I just wanna back it up, don't beat. Say your name in key. I know what I want from you. You know what you want from me. I just wanna back it up, don't beat. Say your name in key. I've been waiting on it all week. So tell me where you wanted me to be. Yeah.
Freeze, at your back. The way freeze, at your back. The way freeze, at your back. The way I like it, can't deny. Your body bang like dynamite. You the feel I'm your kind of nice.
See me, eye to eye, we go back to back, we go 9 to 9. Body on it, dynamite. Take you to my posy, we can finalize.
Backstroke on it, swimming in the kitchen till the bars. Do everything to me, but baby, don't stop. You don't even need my consent, killing me, baby. I just want a little bit of your time, make a day so. Make we date tonight, take a joke, call up you. You can call me every time you want more. Move that thing, come rest on me now. I get the kind of way, go make you bend for me now. All night, baby, all night. Bend your back, hold my hand. Now you did make a nigga fantasize. I be drowning out your river now. It's alright, realize. Come on, time, you're my vibe.
I just wanna back it up, don't beat. Say your name in key. I know what I want from you. You know what you want from me. I just wanna back it up, don't beat. Say your name in key. I've been waiting on it all week. So tell me where you wanted me to be. Yeah.
Freeze, at your back. The way I like it, can't deny. Your body bang like dynamite. You the feel I'm your kind of nice.
See me, eye to eye, we go back to back, we go 9 to 9. Body on it, dynamite. Take you to my posy, we can finalize.
Digiringo, silly. Da.
Yes, I'll be single, forever single. No go mingle. The one I want is no single. Oh, single. Another love and lost on this side. She was an angel, more than an angel. I no go on you, everyone knows the girl I did tell you. But spoon some holding, so she's not
my days. Somebody steal my baby. You know they can carry your love. This mama go back up, oh no. Oh my days. I never want to share my girl. You know they can carry your love. You never me say love, say love.
Them don't carry my cross, go, cross, go, cross, go. Them don't carry my somebody, oh somebody. My body they pay me.
Oh my God, God, God. Them don't carry my somebody, oh somebody.
try to give you the peace, I give you everything that you need. See me now, why you can't put the blame on BB? You touching me that in the end you only have yourself. It's love been so fast, and what I thought it was intent, Louis, Olivia.
Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. All right, we want to begin this morning's program with a short prayer, so please bow down your heads. Almighty God, we humbly beseech thee to look with favor upon this center. Grant that it may perform its high duty as in thy sight. Give divine guidance to our leadership, partners, and stakeholders with discernment, vision, integrity, and courage, that through the labors of this institution, our country and its citizens may be well and truly served, and thy good purposes for human life be realized in our midst. Amen. Once again, I'd like to welcome you all to the Center for Policy Scrutiny. This morning, we are gathered here for a very important assignment, and it is our first assignment for the year 2026. So welcome to our premises if this is your first time joining us. Shortly, I'll hand you over to our moderator, who happens to be Mr. Winston Amwa of Joy FM, or the Joy News brand, and he will take us through the program. I'd like to announce that this program is live on Joy News. We're also streaming live on the Facebook page of CPS and, of course, our YouTube channel. So if you're watching us, we want to welcome you all. Once again, let me now hand you over to our moderator for this morning, Mr. Winston Amwa. A round of applause for him.
Thank you very much, Kweku Obenje, for that introduction. So we know that for some time I've been having conversations about resource-backed currency, okay? And for many of you, you've become interested, particularly because we've started a conversation about how we can buy, sell gold to back our currency, to enhance the city's appreciation and still make losses. In the midst of all of that, we think it will be important to actually have a conversation on how we can restructure Ghana's monetary architecture. And that's why we're here this morning, to have a conversation about, resources and how we could use that to reconstruct Ghana's monetary architecture. But before we get into the lecture itself, let's welcome some brief remarks from the Executive Director of CPS, Dr. Edu Owusu-Sarkodie.
Thank you, Winston. Our Honorable Presenter, Professor Paul Alagi Dede, distinguished guests, the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. On behalf of the Board of Directors and the staff of CPS, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to our premises. The Center for Policy Scrutiny is a new generation think tank in Ghana dedicated to promoting high-quality research and advocacy that influences public policy. Since our inception about 5 months ago, CPS has conducted 3 major reviews. First, the 24-hour economy and accelerated export development program. Second, the 2026 budget statement and economic policy of the government of Ghana, and third, fighting terrorism in the Middle East and Africa. After the reviews, we then proceeded to hold public fora like this to solicit more ideas from relevant stakeholders in order to contribute to the public discourse on the effective implementation of these important policy documents. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, today's gathering is the fourth in the series of events so far. This special forum on rich in gold, poor in liquidity, Omnidox, and the reconstruction of Ghana's monetary architecture marks another special occasion where we come together to brainstorm on how to address development challenges. The excellent article written by Professor Paul Alagidede advances a more structural diagnosis of the macroeconomic vulnerability of the country. Ghana, despite being one of the world's leading gold producers, the economy remains structurally liquidity constrained, recurrently exposed to foreign exchange stress, and dependent on external financing for stabilization. Therefore, the issue is not about scarcity, because we have gold in abundance. And I just learned yesterday that alagidede means in abundance. But the architectural design that fails to translate real assets abundance into usable monetary capacity. Ghana has abundant gold. We are the leading producer of gold in Africa and number 6 in the whole world. The unconfirmed figure of gold production last year in 2025 was 5.1 million ounces of gold. Multiply this figure by the average international price of gold gives you $18.3 billion. Translate this into Ghana cedis as 234 billion Ghana cedis. And this amount, ladies and gentlemen, only gold export, this amount is more than total revenue and grants for the government last year. Because total revenue and grants stood at 230, and gold alone export stands at 234. So 4 billion cedis more than the government's total revenue and grants. It shows how important gold is to our economy. Again, gold accounts for 65% of our total exports. 65%, only gold. 65% of our total exports. Some attempts have been made in the past to get full benefits from gold. And at this point, CPS commends the originators of the Domestic Gold Purchase Program, within which we find the Gold for Reserves Program, which has contributed significantly to increasing the country's gold reserves from 8 tons in 2021 to 38 tons in 2025. Despite this progress made, reserve accumulation is still below our peers' level. Ghana produces similar gold with Mexico and Kazakhstan. And Mexico and Kazakhstan, they have over 120 tons of gold reserves, and Ghana has 38. So we need to do more. It is against this backdrop that the paper advances Omnidox, a metacognomic framework that reframes macroeconomic analysis around asset stocks, balance sheets, and foreign convertibility rather than income flows alone. CPS is honored to have our distinguished Professor of Finance to share his paper with us. The findings and recommendations of this paper and presentation today will go a long way to shape public discourse around gold and liquidity. We are also grateful to have all of you here. I see my students and distinguished guests. We are grateful to have you here. Your support and participation mean a lot to us. As we embark on today's program, I encourage us all to engage, connect, and make the most of this opportunity. Let's create an atmosphere of collaboration, inspiration, and friendliness. Once again, I welcome you all to our premises, and I look forward to a memorable and successful strategy to improve liquidity using gold. Thank you, and good morning.
We can definitely do better. Another huge round of applause for him. Dr. Edu Owusu-Sarkodie is Executive Director for the Center for Policy Scrutiny, which means we can get into our presentation for this morning, to be done by a leading African economist and policy thinker whose work focuses on reimagining development, finance, and growth from an endogenous African perspective. He is the Bank of Ghana Chair in Finance and Economics at the University of Ghana, Professor of Finance at the University of Wits, and a founding scholar at the Nile Valley Multiversity. His research and policy engagements sit at the intersection of macroeconomic stability, domestic capital mobilization, trade, and infrastructure finance. He is widely recognized for advancing alternatives to orthodox development models that have left Ghana and much of Africa highly indebted, externally dependent, and structurally vulnerable despite vast domestic wealth. His work combines rigorous empirical analysis with institutional design, focusing on how African economies can finance growth using their own resources, natural, financial, and productive. He is the intellectual architect of metanomics and Omnidox, frameworks that underpin concepts such as resource-based monetary sovereignty, endogenous resource-backed currencies, and natural capital treasuries. These ideas inform current debates on domestic resource mobilization, debt sustainability, pension and insurance-led finance, and the reform of the global financial architecture, including ongoing work with multilateral institutions. Beyond academia, our presenter is actively involved in translating theory into practice through policy advisory work, institutional reform initiatives, and enterprise-based experimentation in finance, agriculture, infrastructure, and publishing. At today's lecture, he'll be speaking on alternative economic pathways for Ghana's development, focusing on how domestic capital, natural wealth, and institutional reform can be harnessed to achieve sustainable growth, resilience, and economic sovereignty. Let's welcome Professor Paul Alagidede with a round of applause.
Thank you very much, Winston. Director of the Center for Policy Scrutiny, Dr. Edu Owusu-Sarkodie, distinguished guest. See my colleagues here, Kofi, and students. To the great ancestors of this land and the indigenous leaders, to those listening to us online, offline, and off-world. It's a great pleasure to be here to share with you some ideas of some of the work that I've been doing at the University of Ghana and also at the University of the Witwatersrand on how to reimagine the monetary architecture that African countries, not just Ghana, find themselves in. So we are at a very pivotal moment in our development as a nation and also as a continent. And so this lecture really is based on continuing work that we are doing and looking specifically at gold, largely because of the interest that has been generated over the last few months concerning the work that the Gold for Reserve program has brought. We have all seen it in the macroeconomic indicators, significant shifts in the liquidity position of the country. And there is quite a lot of optimism about what is possible for us as a country. Now the question we've been asking is, why didn't we see this all this while? And so my work is really about providing us with a framework that will help us to analyze this. And this framework should be long-lasting enough for any group of people who have the capacity to run the country to take it to the next step. So today's lecture will look at three main things, giving you the economic thought that underlies our development trajectory up to this point. I won't go too far, just after the immediate post-independence era,
up to now. So if you like, let's just focus on the last 60 or so years. I see this to be largely defined by two main ideas of economic development: the orthodox model and the heterodox model. I'll say a little bit more about that. And these models, my argument is that although they have been successful in many ways in giving us ideas about how to proceed with development and organize society, in some sense, they also have been quite limited in their ability, especially to take developing countries like Ghana, who are resource abundant, into high-level, sustainable, and steady-state growth. So they create what I call the paradox of scarcity in the midst of abundance. Then the second thing I want to discuss today really is about what I describe as the treadmill effect. That is, if we don't reimagine economic development and we stay with these two systems of economic thought, all that we've been doing is marching time. So that requires a reimagining of economic theory and philosophy, and that's what we introduce here in this lecture. I have titled it the Omnidox School of Metanomics, and that's a new framework in which we define the specific tools and instruments that are required to take the country to the next level of its development evolution. And then in the third stage of my contribution today in this lecture is really to look at specific policy options that will help our policymakers, be they the handlers of the economy or those measuring our national income, and also to introduce new things into our classrooms where we can teach a new brand of students who graduate into the policy-making space to do policy in a new way. Part of my diagnosis has been that the problem we are facing is largely due to the kind of knowledge that we have been taught in the classrooms. And I'm also guilty of that. I have been regurgitating the same economics that I learned in school, and that has been what I see my students also implement in the various policy space. In this new era, we want to reimagine and think differently. So in this presentation, you will see the age of regeneration. I show you the three main schools of thought. The first school, if you like, you can also look at it as stages of economic thought, the evolution of economic thought. The standard economic theories we learned in the classrooms is what we call the orthodox economics, which is basically a reductionist approach to looking at national income, measuring growth. What it simply says that we only measure what we can see, feel, and touch. So all our discussions about gross national income or what constitutes growth is what we can physically measure and touch. So if you have resources like gold or cocoa, it's only when those resources are extracted and sold in the market that you can really value. And that's a very good way of looking at it. It has given us a lot of ideas about how to maximize welfare, how to measure, and look at development in many ways. There is another school that looks at it from another point of view, that the orthodox school has not actually been able to deal with things such as how do you explain why developing countries like Africa are stuck in the low-level equilibrium that they find themselves. So heterodox economists will always explain that institutional development matter for growth, which is ignored by orthodox thinkers. Things like colonialism and imperialism, resource extraction. There's quite a huge range of theories that come here. And they have also presented to us an alternative view. But really, both views, if you look at it, describe these as linear paradigms of economic thought. They have been excellent in guiding our development so far. But if we want to go to the next step and want to transcend where we have found ourselves, and I'll show you some statistics and data later on, we need to reimagine development in a new way. There was, or there has always been an African way or an indigenous way of measuring growth and of looking at development, which is rooted in the very resources that we have. So when I look at myself growing up in the north, in my village in Pungutelania, when you measure the total income of the society, you are looking at the number of cattle that you have, or perhaps chicken and guinea fowls, how many lands. The total GDP of the Pungu economy is also made up of how many people do you have around, the social capital, the connections and relationships, the contributions of women and men in society. What can be visibly measured and what cannot be so visibly measured is all included in the national income of that society. And the system is made up of a balance of society. So you hardly hear of widespread inequality in the midst of abundance. And that's the kind of economic system that we are talking about here. So within this system, the money is based on the resources that is owned by the society, whether extracted or not. So it's the total value of the wealth that we know today, not tomorrow or not in some past time. So the concept that we are talking about is living in the present moment. When you look at what the orthodox and the heterodox model does, it's always deferring the present to the future. So you're looking to extract into the future to realize your wealth potential. And we can just formalize this in terms of national income accounting to see what I'm talking about. The current system of national income is based on what we call the system of national accounting, which is the standard United Nations accounting system of measuring GDP, or gross domestic product, of countries. So you value the total market value of goods and services produced over a certain period of time, usually 1 year. Okay? The visible canopy is what that tracks mostly in the economy. That system of accounting ignores quite a number of things. Some of my colleagues have already pointed this out. In November, we had the African Review of Economics and Finance Conference. We had Professor Abinodru, who pointed out the issues of unpaid care work, for instance. In our economies, women contribute quite a significant amount to national output, but most of it is completely ignored in the current system of national accounting. So it is with things like the informal economy. About 80% or so of our employment is generated from the informal sector in many African economies, not just in Ghana. And so it is with many things like our indigenous knowledge. We tend to look at the tourism and crafts, but we have quite a lot of spiritual wealth, social capital, that escapes totally the system of national accounting. So our metanomics framework says that let's go a little bit beyond. So we are not throwing this away. Let's value all of this and include it and see what happens to our total output. It turns out that when you look at the current system that we use, which is the SNA, I call it, System of National Accounting, our GDP now, officially, it's around $82.31 billion. If you convert this to cities, we're just around $1.2 billion dollars, cedis economy. That ignores all of these factors that I've already indicated. But if you move to the metanomic framework, you're looking at the asset-based of the economy and also adding some of the unpaid work, indigenous knowledge system, and the informal wage that we don't account. So conservatively speaking, this data also exists. We just simply added it to what the national accounting system currently does not. And it turns out that we have a much larger economy than we are dealing with. So if you look at it, by shifting from the orthodox system of accounting, just change the accounting framework from flows, that is measuring current market prices, into stocks, you see an economy that is actually about 21 times more than what it is according to the system of accounting. Now, this is not my invention per se, but if you look at what Nigeria did a couple of years ago, just by changing the divisor, the GDP went up by almost about 100%. Kenya did it. We did it here in Ghana. Those were tinkering with just the devices. But here I'm talking about adding what we are not yet accounting for. Okay? Now, if you look at the orthodox system of thinking, it would take us in 2024 growth rate about 5 years to reach roughly $100 billion economy. But if we are thinking in terms of what the indigenous way of looking at economic development is, we are already $100 billion economy right now. So we don't need to wait for 5 years. That's all things equal. So that's the distinction that we are looking at. And this produces, if you go by the orthodox, heterodox approach, we are simply on a treadmill. Because over the past 60 or so years, the economy has been constantly looking out for liquidity buffers, whereas that liquidity is already within the economy. And this is the title of my paper, that in the midst of abundance of gold, we are liquidity trapped. According to the data that we have, Ghana has been to the International Monetary Fund about 18 times in the last 60 years. In fact, in the late 80s, it was much more regular, up to the 90s. In the last 35 years since we've gone into democratic governance, we have visited the fund 10 times. If you look at what we have done with that, it works out to roughly an average of about 3.5 years of visit. And this has been an economy that at the same time has tremendous amount of resources that can be unlocked for domestic liquidity. So, yes, we can talk about the political problems, mismanagement, and etc. But in this particular presentation, what I'm hinting at is that the accounting system and the economic thought that is running the economy is one of the key problems that keeps us returning and looking outside for liquidity to finance an economy that is already rich. So I get what we call the paradox of locked granary. The current system of national accounting only counts our visible gold that leaves our shores, meaning that we are forced to borrow paper from abroad while sitting on a bedrock of wealth at home. So, speaking in real terms, Ghana is not a poor country. This is a very rich nation. It's a rich house with a locked door. We have been begging for bread on the streets while our granary is full, simply because we have lost that key to our balance sheet. And metanomics, I believe, is one of the keys that are present in this particular setting to enable us unlock the door of liquidity that will help the nation move forward. So orthodox economics tends to treat our resources simply as flow, something that we have to dig up and sell to pay off debt. But metanomics treat this as an asset. It's a permanent foundation for our currency, for our budget, and for our national development plans. So we can create our own liquidity without triggering inflation if that liquidity is anchored and verified in the resource that we have in abundance in this country, and that is the gold. So the sovereign dividend that we have has to be used, and we can see evidence of this all around us. Gold is one of the most important metals globally. In ancient Egypt, what we call Kemet, the land of the blacks, our ancestors used gold. In fact, it used to be called the flesh of the gods. And we see it today. When we migrated and left that land, we're looking only for lands that had abundance of gold. So in the West African gold curtain, from Ghana to Cote d'Ivoire to Burkina Faso to Mali, all that area is littered with gold. But when you see the largest concentration of gold, the richest gold vein is found right here on this land. In fact, some have valued our gold to be one of the richest in the world. You can get as much as 21 karat gold here. But the balance is that we have not been able to translate this gold into usable things. But elsewhere, this gold has made kingdoms, the crowns of kings and queens in different lands. But you also see it, we adorn our kings and queens here with gold. And when they come out, you see that this is a nation that is pretty rich in resources. Gold in my refers really not the yellow metal alone, but also the white metals, green metals, and other sources of black gold, if you like, the oil, and other resources that we have. So by unlocking these resources, we have a great potential for liquidity that can back our monetary system. In the history of the global monetary system, gold has played a very significant role. If you look at the classical gold standard, roughly around 1870s to 1900s, gold was the main metal that played that role. There were other metals later on, like silver, but gold played a significant role also in the Bretton Woods system, all the way up to the 1970s, when the US dollar was pegged to gold, and thereafter it was allowed to float from 1971 onwards. So gold plays a very significant role as a store of value, as an inflation hedge. It can also be used as a portfolio diversifier and a strategic reserve asset, for that matter, for emerging market economies like Ghana. And so when you look at the global landscape of gold, our executive director indicated, we are the 6th largest producer of gold in the world. And this is not a small achievement, because Ghana is making roughly around 140 tons of gold in a year, depending on which measure you are using. And this particular gold has also, in terms of central bank reserves, we are actually done quite well in the last 5 years compared to the previous 60 years. And that gold reserve accumulation have been very aggressive in the last 5 years alone. So roughly around 38 tons is what is held in our reserves. The argument from the metanomics point of view is that you can do much, much better by keeping the gold right here, rather than digging it, selling it for dollars, which we use to then support the reserves. So when you look at the balance sheet of Ghana in terms of gold, and I'm looking at some empirical data here using most recent statistics on what we know, Current gold price per ounce is around $4,500. And if we are working at the current exchange rates to the dollar around 10 or 11 dollars, we can see already we know the total proven reserves of gold in our soil is around 1,000 metric tons, which is valued around $146 billion, or 1.5 billion, Ghana cedis. So the argument in our paper is that if we can activate just around 40 to 60% of just the gold that we have alone, holding all our resources constant, assuming we don't have any other resource, cocoa, shea nuts, lithium, manganese, and others, what amount of fiscal space can we unlock for domestic liquidity creation to support currency and national development plan? So the illusion of poverty, as the table reveals, is that Ghana's in-situ gold, which is now valued around $1.5 trillion, is really quite significant. But when you look at it from the point of view of the orthodox way of thinking, this country is a poor country that constantly has to go for liquidity, not within, but outside. So the country's official reserves, that's currently only the portion that is currently liquid in the eyes of orthodox economics, is just about 4%, that's 3.8 of the total value. The paradox is therefore we are considered insolvent or stressed by credit agencies because they ignore the 1.5 trillion that is right here in our land. It's under our feet, and they only look at the $60 billion in the central bank. That is a shift in economic thinking. So all that we need to do is just to shift our thinking from the orthodox and add one more layer, which is what we are talking about, the metanomics system. So the liquidity activation, which is our orthodox, Omnidox paradigm, is by activating 40 to 60% of equity of our in-situ reserves. We release, if we do that, we can release between 634 billion cedis to around 952 billion in fiscal space, just what we have already, not in the future, right now. So the fiscal comparison, if we have to put this in perspective, is that Ghana's total budget in 2024, which is around 26 billion, could have all been funded domestically without looking outside. That's the 2024 budget. So by activating about 50% of our in-situ equity, which is right under our feet, it's enough to fund about 4 years of national expenditure without borrowing a single peso from outside the country. So we're living in a very big paradox. A wealthy nation that is working cup in hand, begging. It reminds me of the biblical story when the apostles were entering and they met the young man sitting and begging. They said, "We don't have anything to give you, but take up the gold that you already have," just to paraphrase, okay, and use it. So in recent time, we have seen quite a number of moves, which is signaling to strategic policy, shifts. That is towards what we are talking about, but it's still baby steps. The establishment of the gold board has been a success story in less than a year. And we have seen that if we just change the rules about how gold is treated. Currently, most of the large-scale mines just ship the gold out. It goes to support other currencies, and we have to go back and get that money back here. And so if you change the rules about how that is done, it just keeps the money right here. Again, if you also look at how we treat this very resource, what we are talking about is keeping the gold as our currency. I call it an anchor to the currency, not selling it and getting dollars, because the dollar is still a fiat currency. Okay, that's a distinction. So the gold board's success has been able to mobilize, according to current data, around 10.8 billion. That's dollars. This is around 117 billion in a single year from just small-scale and artisanal mines. Now we have to talk about the cost of doing that. Environmental economics will indicate that the externality inflicted on our rivers, on our water bodies and environment could be huge. Maybe this is a very important PhD topic for those of you who are wanting to study, because we haven't yet talked about that. But that's been going on for quite a long time. It's not just in the last few years. And so it is with the other costs associated with getting this. So we should bear in mind the effects of trying to get gold in the ways in which we do it. When I asked, how did our ancestors do it? And normally they say, when you don't know, just ask Abrewa. Okay? When you ask Abrewa, she will have the solutions. So they told me that there was a more sustainable way of getting the gold without all those huge machines, destroying the rivers and etc. So we probably need to go back and check that over 100 years ago, how were we digging the gold and taking it out of the land? And this could provide an inkling into what we can do with what we are doing with the current resurgence in the use of gold as an anchor for our currency. So in the age of regeneration, what we are talking about really is look at the juxtaposition of the research that we have done, is that when you consider in the table here how to escape the treadmill that we have been on over the past 60 years, gold could provide a way out. So the rich in gold magnitude is that the total value of Ghana's gold is more than twice the entire national debt, which is now estimated around 648 billion cedis. So in the age of reductionism, which we call the orthodox system of thinking, this is seen as a mountain or gold debt that is in the ground is debt. But in the age of regeneration, in the context of what we're talking about in metanomics, this is a huge opportunity for balance sheet renewal and balance sheet financing. So the poor in liquidity resolution currently means that even though the nation is poor in liquidity because it simply struggles to finance its budget, annual budget, which we have to constantly go and borrow. But by activating the gold, we can bring in a significant amount of resources domestically. So sovereign wealth activation and external dependency is really the choice that we have to make in our economic policy discussion. Are we going to continue to be governed by the rules of liquidity activation, or we will rather focus on looking within to collect the total amount that we already have? So if you still with me up to this point, there are quite a number of things that we can talk about as takeaway policy levers that policymakers can work with. At the Statistical Service, for instance, we need to think about how to revalue our national income. All the textbooks that we have studied in school so far have been all about accounting for flows. I'm saying let's add the stocks to what we have. So we are not throwing away the flow accounting system, simply account for the stocks of reserves that we already have right under your feet. So the Statistical Service must move beyond the visible canopy of market transactions to measure the roots of the economy. Adopt an asset-based system of national accounting, that is the GDP plus all the invisibles and unaccounted activities. Transition from the flow-centric system to the asset-based. This involves recognizing the true base of the economy, which is rooted in our metanomic calculations. We said that it's about 21% larger than what official records is saying when we include household production, informal undercount wage, and indigenous knowledge system. And then more importantly for the statistical service, we need to do a proper sovereign asset audit. This is very important. Kofi and I have been talking about asset tokenization. If you want to tokenize gold, we really need to verify these assets and be able to measure properly and get the correct stocks, and not just gold, but our land, our other resources that we have, timber, to establish a credit foundation for a true national balance sheet. From the central bank point of view, we have to also move gradually from borrowed economic doctrines that are based on looking externally for liquidity. So the central bank must shift from the current system of looking out and anchoring the economy more in the domestic asset base. We can operationalize this. We talk in the paper about the resource-based monetary sovereignty, which really means to take full control of our monetary system and root it in our indigenous natural resources that we already have here. And so we can also establish prudential guardrails that maintains the liquidity envelope through activated equity. And then at the Ministry of Finance, we must transition from managing the flows to managing the national balance sheet. This would give us a more leverage to manage the economy. So we are really at a crossroads where indigenous intelligence meets global algebra by establishing natural capital treasuries and sovereign tokenization. We will be changing our accounting system and also reclaiming our soul and live really like rich people. Ghana is not a poor nation. It is a wealthy nation in a temporary state of amnesia, and it's time to wake up. So if we look at just the 10 billion that we have harvested last year alone, we can declare that the era of the wealthy pauper is officially over. Ghana is a gold superpower, and we must live and act as such. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Alakidede, which means if we have questions, we can ask, okay? So you just show by hand, and then we'll get a microphone to you, and then you ask your question. So let's see those of you who want to ask questions. Since Prof talked about his students being here, I'm sure you have a lot of questions. Okay, there's a first hand here. Okay, first, second, who else? We'll take 3 questions at a time, okay? Yes, please tell us your name, and then you can go ahead with your question.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Amy. Thank you, Prof, for the presentation. As always, when you give a presentation, you make us think beyond the status quo. So I have 2 main questions. The first has to do with quantifying indigenous knowledge, because that's a key part of the Ghana Statistical Service, including that extra 21% room for the country. The second has to do with the fact that you are advocating for other measures. It will be prudent also to include the cost of extracting the gold. And how do you also suggest we will do that? Is it something prudent to include into the computation? Or thank you.
Okay. We'll pick 2 more questions, then you.
Okay, Prof, thank you very much. My first question goes in line with her last question. Asking, how do we then cater for depletion? Because we know the natural resource depletes over time. So how do we then cater for depletion?
And my next question is when our governments are suffering, they go to the outside institutions to seek for policy credibility. So in this model, the new model of economic thinking, how do we achieve policy credibility when we are suffering internally?
Okay. Okay, I think you want to ask a question. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prof. And like Amy just said, was very thought-provoking presentation. My first question hedges on the success and then the prospects for the tokenization you made mention of. Now, we know that there are certain policies that were in line with the thinking you're suggesting now. For instance, the Gold for Oil project, the Bank of Ghana's ECD, the ECD digital currency, and that of the crypto guidelines that was just published in line to accept we say, future technologies, innovations in the CD management. I want to know for you, for example, is the RBM the resource-backed monetary system, and then the Omnidox policy is an alternative to dollarization? Because I feel it's in a way going to limit our use of the dollars. And so is that a de-dollarization strategy we are going on? And the second bit I would like to add to that is that since we are not on our own independent, we do trade in terms of the other economies and other regional frameworks that we have. How do we just circumvent these Omnidox principles in line with current geopolitical spaces that we are having on between China, Russia, India, these countries that are coming up of late? Thank you.
Okay, Prof, you can answer the questions now.
Thank you very much for those deep questions. Maybe let me start from Michael's work on the success of tokenization. I think it's just beginning. So you've seen the Bank of Ghana has just, the bill for the digital assets was passed, I think, early this year. So this is still at the early stages. So we can't really talk much about that for now, except that there is a good signal of policy direction as to where this is going to go. And so perhaps engage with what is happening in that space of tokenization when the policies eventually seep through the economy. But just on your second thought, let's be clear, we're not talking about de-dollarization here. Everything I'm talking about, I'm not saying throw anything away, just add a little bit to your thinking about what to do with the economy. But your point on our relationship with international organizations is very key, because becoming sovereign when you belong to these international organizations, it has to have a very limited way in looking at it. So we're not talking about 100% sovereignty in that sense, because when you join the IMF, you have agreed in one way or the other to forego certain types of independence in the way you run your monetary policy. So you can't just wake up and start to increase reserves beyond certain limits, as you have seen with the concerns that are being expressed over time. And there are parameters within which you can work with. But we have to be mindful of those. But domestically, we have lots of leverage to do what we can do. All that we are saying is turn your attention inward and look within for what we have already. With that, you don't need permission to start to use your own resources to finance your development, okay? And then to the question, I didn't hear your name, but yeah, how do we cater for depletion? Again, depletion has to do with a certain logic of living and thinking, which in our metanomic system, we are looking at balance. So as I said to you, indigenous systems of exploiting resources have been more humane and balanced than what we are doing now with big machines, destroying rivers, etc. Those linked to the environmental cost of destruction have to be properly accounted for. And so within the metanomic system, we have just extended the system of economic environmental accounting to ensure that whatever is taken out of the land is also consistent with correct environmental practices. We do have these in our laws anyway, in the environmental protection agencies, about right ways to exploit, but also in terms of taking care of the people whose lands those resources are being extracted from. So far, we haven't paid critical attention to that. And I think as we evolve in our thinking about new ways of looking at development, we have to focus critically on that. And there's a lot of literature in environmental economics about how to, internalize the external effects of production and consumption, which will help to address some of those. How do we achieve policy credibility when we are suffering? So as I said to you, I'm more upbeat about this economy because I always see that I live in a very rich country and we come from a very rich background. So we have to also begin in our psychology to think that we are actually rich before we can see it happen in our lives. So what I'm discussing is actually more consistent with policy credibility, to activate domestic liquidity without engineering inflation is simply what my model is all about. So if you have about 40 to 60% of the total 1,000 tons of gold that are already in your metric tons that are already in your soil, you have such a huge liquidity that you can activate. So you don't need to print money to support your economy. And we have known this. The monetary school has established this over the last 60 years, that all inflation is a monetary problem. And so with what we are discussing, you will actually kill that problem without sacrificing credibility, okay? Quantifying indigenous knowledge, that is a very important area. We have an association called the National Association of Traditionalists and Ancestral Venerators, who are looking at indigenous crafts, indigenous spiritual systems and culture, traditions, our dances. If you look at some studies that have been done by the African Development Bank, they have actually calculated some of these, but the literature is just emerging. So I think this is also a very large area of future research that we can look into. How do we value indigenous knowledge, for instance? Maybe we can use some of the imputed measures that exist already. We can look at the value that it brings to us in terms of revenue. And that could become one other metric that we can add to our system of national accounting. But it is an area that I strongly believe we need to explore more. And already we have some guidance in how to do this, and that can come in the way. Thank you.
Okay, which means we can go for the next batch of questions. I think there's a question that has not been. Her question, you've answered all of them.
I included the cost of extraction to
okay.
Yeah.
Any more questions? Okay, there's a hand here in the back.
Yes, thank you very much. Prof, thanks so much. I want to find out how you include fluctuation in gold prices, whether you include that in your analysis, considering how you said we should just activate about 40% of our gold and we are good to go as a country. But give and take, have you looked at that in your analysis? Have you looked at gold price, which keeps fluctuating? Thank you.
Okay. I think there's a, yes, you want to ask a question too.
Spoke about extracting about 40 to 60% of our gold resources. So that's going to overexploit our resources. So what will the future generation do? Will they come back to living like how we are living, borrowing from the external bodies to cater for the expenditures? Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay.
Hey, bro. Hi, everyone. My name is Kofi, and I'm the Kofi that Professor said that Kofi and I have been talking about tokenization. So I wanted to see if you could maybe shed a little bit more light on what that roadmap looks like for how we move on to this, to the research-based, monetary system. Because, you mentioned some stuff about how there are powers that be that, the moment we decide to change our monetary policies, that they start making, some noise. And it's a little, sad to hear that we have such, eagle eyes, watching over us, like, what does that look like? How do we, get over it? And what does that roadmap look like for how we can get onto this, gold standard without making, a lot of noise? Maybe might corporations, increasing, their balance sheet with assets like gold, be one of them, and what are those implications? So if you could touch up on maybe what that roadmap looks like, I think that might, educate, a lot of people. Yeah, thank you.
All right, Prof.
Right. Thank you. So just one clarification. So I'm not talking about the classical gold standard. I'm also not talking about a gold peg currency. I'm also only saying let's anchor our currency in the resources that we have. But on the roadmap, it's very interesting because Ghana's gold, the proven reserves is what I've shown you. But what we haven't been able to measure yet, we don't know. And day in and out, the geological maps are showing us that new resources are coming into the fray. We've just seen lithium has come. And so when I talk about gold, as I said, it's not just the yellow metal, but the other metals, although in this paper I focus just crucially on gold. So I think, in my own view, that we do have more gold in our land than we have measured so far, similar to what I've talked about in the limitations of our national income accounting and the geological surveys. In fact, one of my colleagues, mineral engineer, told me we haven't updated our geological maps in a long time. So if we have to update, a couple of years ago, there was quite a lot of gold deposits in the north, in Bolgatanga area. And there's quite a lot. And so we don't want to mention this for people to go galamseying, but there is quite a lot of that. But in terms of what we can do, the road ahead of us is that gold will play a very leading role in our monetary system. Our view is that we don't need permission to use this gold. So that puts to rest whether what the IMF is telling us we should be listening or not. But then we are working within an international space, as Michael obviously said. So within the rules that you have signed, there's quite a lot of leverage to do what you can do if you need to support your currency and to keep domestic liquidity within. And that's what we need our policymakers to be very bold, as they are already doing now. With the mining contracts, the current regime has already signaled that some of them will not be renewed. We will renegotiate these contracts. And that's what we have been advocating for a long time. It's important to sit down and renegotiate. Because when you visit the gold mining areas and you see that if this is where that yellow metal is coming from and the conditions in which the people live, and as for us as a nation, we should also be able to send back more of the development to those areas to bring their level of development up. So we don't need permission to use our gold or any other resource for that matter to unlock the liquidity that we should be unlocking and to finance the budget. So I see a very bright future, especially with some of the baby steps that we have already taken. And if the policy tightens and we can sit together and agree that these are some of the colonial laws that consistently sell our gold out when we dig it, and let's change them together. This is where we have to work together and not the divisive way that we have been looking at it. Come together, sit down in this particular national thing of importance, expunge those laws and renegotiate contracts. In some countries, it's a 60-40 split, where the nation could take 60. You bring in the machines, exploit, take 40%, I take 60. But in our current setting, we are getting far less than 20 to 30% of what is on our ground. And that is the cause, part of the liquidity problem, beyond the framework of economic ideology that exists. The fluctuations in gold price, if you look at gold, actually it has been quite volatile for some time, and that is quite true. So in the paper, we've shown several scenarios. What happens if you just have about a 10% slump in the global gold price? Okay, that will immediately impact on the revenues and the fiscus. And so those simulations have been done to show that activating the 40 to 60% that we talked about, what are the policy levers? Changing the revenue expenditure components, and also in the paper I talked only about gold, but that's a very stylized example. I'm only arguing in this paper that if you activate just gold alone, you have that much buffer of liquidity. But if you have a shock of 10 or 20%, those scenarios we've shown that we can fall on other commodities. Let's say we also have a cocoa shock, but it's quite unlikely that in a given year you have a correlated shock across all our exports. So we've shown that the country is actually far richer than we have been talking about, and most of what we are doing is to bring that to the public space so that people will know, policymakers, and all of us as academics and students and also media people, to highlight the fact that this is a very rich country in potential and in actual, if we will only begin to look inside and activate what we already have. Okay, the young man talked about what happens to the future generations. And that's a very important question, because we are our ancestors sitting here, and we will be our ancestors 100 years from now. So if we activate all this 40 to 60% and destroy the land and cause all the damage, what kind of water are we going to be drinking? And we have seen children born with, birth defects in the mining areas. In the indigenous sense, as I told you already, they have technologies that are quite different. When we go to the indigenous knowledge, they have rituals and observances about the forest and where to mine and where not to mine. Today, we just don't care about any of those. We can enter almost about any forest and mine almost about any time. There were indigenous rules about when and how and where to mine. So they knew about the gold in certain spots, but they would never touch it. Because the river currents also flow through, the same gold vein, but they will never touch it because this is our source of water. So we need to turn back again, Sankofa as we call it. Look at what our ancestors, who are us sitting here right now, were doing that was more balanced and sustainable. Because gold has been here for thousands of years. It's only in the last 100 years that our mining technology, which is rooted in the orthodox system of scarcity, that take everything now and sell, otherwise you lack. But in the indigenous sense, you always live in abundance. So more gold will come, but use it more sustainably. But even just for our use, we have quite a large leverage to do this. So your question about future generations and intergenerational equity is really at the heart of the debate we are having about the cost of extracting gold. And I think we need to really look at the environmental cost and damage and the societal cost. We are currently only looking at it in terms of how much in cedis or dollars we are losing or we have lost. But really, the costs are much deeper. Thank you.
Great. Any more questions? Oh, you have a follow-up. Okay. Please get a microphone to him.
Thank you, Prof. I think in your last submission, you mentioned about the need to look at the cost of extraction. I'm asking if that was also considered in your analysis. I'm asking that because as a country, we've all spoken about the need for us to look inward, but we oftentimes find our leaders with cap in hand going for external support. Is it a situation where they've realized that the cost involved in all this extraction, the exploration, all these costs may be higher? So why wouldn't then as a country then look at the cheaper alternative? I mean, if I'm supposed to pay the debt later, is that not the best option than to look at as a country that we don't have money, we don't have cash in hand, that we then want to focus on our mineral wealth? I'm asking if you looked at the cost with all these extractions.
So I haven't analyzed that in the paper, but this is something that can be done as future studies, as most of you are looking for topics to take deeper. It's not the focus of what I'm doing, but it's very key area in terms of what we can do with the activation, because within the Omnidox Metanomics School, we look at what I call MAAT, which is a balance. So you never change one variable without thinking about how it's going to impact on the other variables. So when I talk about extraction here, I mean indigenous technologies of extraction, which are quite different completely different from what we have. You don't need all those huge machines that they are using in the destruction of the land. And there are. So you do your own research, because there's quite a lot of this knowledge that we have forgotten, and we must wake up to it again. Okay? You can ask in the indigenous communities, there are times where the gold itself will concentrate in a certain area, and you only need to dig just a few meters deep to uncover, tons of gold nuggets. That is there. And we know that that technology exists. So we have had advanced technology here in our land. That advanced technology, somehow, we are asleep to it. And part of what we are discussing is really to wake up to that technology and exploit gold in a different way.
Okay.
Okay, so I just wanted to know, you spoke about how gold has its strong backing, and with regards to exports, it gave us more of revenue comparatively to total revenue and grants. So I was wondering, have there been conversations about we backing our city with gold? If there have, is it something we are doing now, or is it something that we are trying to do probably when there's only a HIPIC or a situationship? That's my question.
So I look at this as an evolutionary path, an evolutionary journey. Most countries have gone through the cycles that we are going through now, and we are also going through it. It's a recapitulation of what we have known before. So we will get there. Some of the steps that are taken at the policy level are walking us towards where we are. In the past, we had the gold for oil, which wasn't, it was just the execution, but the idea itself was very great, but the execution was poorly done. And then now we have the gold for reserve, which I think if we can stay on course, tighten the rules, keep the discipline, can lead us to formally having a city that is fully anchored in our most valuable and abundant resource here. So it's a path that we are traveling. Sometimes we are disappointed that we are not there yet, but we have to crawl somehow before we start walking and maybe flying. And as Eagle Nation, we need to fly at some point.
Okay, I think we can pick a last question.
Please, my question has to do with the challenges associated with mining. I'm trying to ask, do you think the benefit outweighs the challenges as far as the environment or the human cost is concerned? Thank you.
When you ask an economist this type of question, I have to work out the cost benefits before I can give you an answer. But obviously, anecdotally, we need to look at the cost of what the mining of gold. This time we have been focusing much more on the artisanal and small scale. But when you actually go underground and you see what the big mines have done underneath, staggering destruction. So maybe this will be a good work for future research where we calculate what the environmental damage to the communities and into the future, discount that to the benefits that we see in terms of the raw resources that we bring out. Would you like to take up that research?
Interesting. I see there are no more questions, and so what I'll do is that if you want to, say, contribute to the lecture without asking questions, you've asked your questions, you can do that. Maybe you have a view you want to share. Yes, please, let's get a microphone to you, and then you would share your view also. Sure.
Thank you so much. My contribution to Prof discussion is just in line with the non-conventional methods of monetary policy that I see Metanomics and the Omnidox falling into. Take a cue at the CDs evaluation over time, right? From 1965, the first Ghana CDs, to 1975, to 2017. These evolution of the CD I observed could be either for political reasons and for economic reasons. Those that were for the economic reasons had to be undertaken during periods of high inflation and macroeconomic instabilities over the time. Currently, what we are experiencing now, so even before those periods, I see that monetary policy and its effects couldn't have solved all the challenges that we had. Talk of inflation, we came to as close as 50% sometimes before, but currently we see somewhere very close, less than 9% that we have now. And I see that these current monetary indicators that we're observing now had not been traditional monetary policy that we had undertaken. I see that's non-conventional. And so my contribution to Prof discussion is that monetary policy and its traditional processes have not yielded the full benefit we expected over time. And I'm thankful that this way of thinking is coming through for someone like us to also buy into that idea and help the policy grow. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Yes, actually I came to observe what is happening. I'm not one of the students, obviously. I was a student about 50 years ago. I'm glad to see that there's interest to solve this problem locally, and that we know that there will be some opposition or whatever, resistance from outside. So taking all this into consideration and knowing that the younger people, the students are also involved, I think we have to keep it up and have that solution for ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more contributions? Okay, if there are no more contributions, okay, I think there's, is there another contribution? Okay. Then I think we can get Prof to wrap it all up for us nicely. I am tempted to ask as you wrap it up, because you talked about the fact that, the gold for oil was a good policy implementation, may not have been the best. And also because, we're having a current conversation about gold for reserves and how we're implementing it, and you saying we should anchor currency to our natural resources, are we implementing the gold for reserves properly, or you think we could change the implementation as it stands now?
The straightforward answer is that in a space of 12 months, it's really very difficult as a time series analyst myself to be able to, give you a direct answer in this light. So we need to observe. So far, the euphoria and the optimism that it has generated, I think it's something, a momentum that we need to build on and have the hope that gold can do something very significant for us. I haven't looked at the cost benefit of what we are doing yet, but you can see it already reflected in some macro indicators. Maybe it's temporal, we don't know, but let's look at the trend over time. And then we can meet over here again with enough data and say that, with the benefit of hindsight, we've done better. Not. But for now, let's cheer them. All of us, let's put our energy behind what is going on, and let's begin to think that it's possible, after all, that we can have enough liquidity right here without going to borrow money from anywhere. So back to the title of my paper. We are rich in gold, so let's unlock the liquidity right from here. And I think that will be my concluding remarks as well.
Thank you very much, Prof. Maybe Executive Director would have a final comment, and then we'll wrap it all up. That's fine. I see Executive Director doesn't want any problem. No, I wasn't going to ask you any question, but thank you very, very much, Professor Alakidede, and thank you, Center for Policy Scrutiny, also for putting this together in partnership with Joy Business. My name is Winston Amoa, and we've been live on the Joy News channel. Of course, the conversations will continue from tomorrow, because no country wants to be rich in gold, other resources, but poor in liquidity. Thank you very much for joining us, and do have a lovely day. So we'll take a photograph outside, a picture outside.